Martha McCallum over on Fox News decided that the doublespeak and the nonsense from John Kirby of the Biden regime over the White House's hypocrisy. Let's just understand what the hypocrisy is before we hear how they try to explain it. The White House had said, and I said this on Fox yesterday, basically, nice Twitter you got there, Elon. Be a shame if something happened to it. You know, like the old mafia guys that would show up and you'd have to pay the protection money, you know. It's nice business. Be a shame if something happened to it, though. And you go, okay, so it's ominous. It's a threat, right? It's why is the White House watching Twitter? And think about what they're watching it for. Free speech. There has been nothing that Elon has done other than show us, one, some of these Silicon Valley companies have just layers and layers of human resources lard on them. I mean, just unnecessary. Oh, safety and health, trust and health. Oh, diversity and inclusion. All this stuff that they have. Totally
garbage.
Unnecessary for the functioning of the company. He's gutted the company. Clay, Twitter's better than I love Twitter now. Everything I'm tweeting, everything you're tweeting, we're on fire all of a sudden on Twitter. Because people can actually just see it. It's not being throttled. So they hate the free speech component of this. That's one part. They also have shown us, he has shown us that the libs are constantly in meltdown. But the White House had something to say about this. But on Apple and Apple doing the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party, you know, I mean, I remember this. There was a time when, Clay, I think it was like 2009, and there was an effort to keep Twitter from doing some kind of a maintenance so that I would stay on, so that the Iranian protesters at the time would be able to share more. Now, it didn't do anything, honestly, and that unfortunately, they, as I said, authoritarian regimes, goal number one, I mean, I've spent some time in places where the secret police run the country. Goal number one is we stay in power. Like, if people starve, if there's civil war, whatever, we stay in power. Goal number one. That's clearly the case with the CCP, so they're very prepared and good at this, unfortunately. Same thing in Iran. They're very prepared for stifling dissent. So Apple does China's bidding to shut down a technology. It's kind of the reverse. Twitter was supposed to keep the technology open to help the protesters. In this case, Apple shut down a component of its technology to help the CCP. And Martha McCallum is like, yo, dude, what is going on here? Play 5.
But why not say something to Apple? Because we were just told the other day that the White House is keeping an eye on Elon Musk and Twitter. So why would you say that from the podium? You didn't say it, but Karine Jean-Pierre said it, and not call Apple out for helping the Chinese government to suppress their own people's ability to communicate?
Again, I think we've been very clear and consistent on this. Certainly publicly, we've been very open about our desires to be able to see citizens communicate. And you know, Apple, if this is a decision that they're making, then they should have to speak to that. But we can't. And we aren't in the business of telling private companies how to execute their initiatives.
Yeah, but Twitter's a private company, too. So why is Twitter getting one treatment and Apple's getting another is my question.
Well, these are completely two different circumstances. You're talking about the potential. Well, you're talking about the potential for perhaps foreign investment and involvement in the management of Twitter. That's a different issue than what we're talking about here, which is a business decision by Apple.
He got roasted. Blather? He's also not making sense because there has been no suggestion of foreign interference with Twitter in terms of an investment. If you first credit to Martha McCallum, because that is a masterclass on how to hold people accountable for hypocrisy inside of the political position, regardless of what your political bent is. Those are the kind of questions that informed media should be asking. But what she's hitting on here and doing such a fabulous job of is Karine Jean-Pierre from the White House press room. Buck, you talked about this on Fox News, too. Basically said, hey, we're monitoring what Elon Musk is doing. And if we decide that he's done something inappropriate, I don't know what recourse they would follow, but they're basically threatening him.
They're saying, watch your back, Elon.
Yes.
We got eyes on you. That's what they're saying, obviously.
Yes. And how are they, if they're saying that publicly about Twitter, how are they not calling out Apple over refusing to allow protesters to communicate inside of China at the direct behest of the Chinese government.
Well, there's another way really that they could do this and maintain some dignity of their position here. I mean, that I feel badly. Just, I've heard from a lot of people that like Kirby's a very nice guy.
Yeah.
And so he's just in the untenable position of defending an administration that makes it up as it goes along, right? So, I mean, he's got that unenviable job. It's like defending the person who's already signed a confession and is on video committing the crime. Like, it's not going to be easy.
I've done that, by the way. I've done that.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, I'm sure you're very good at it, but it's still not easy.
Yeah, it's tough.
And here he is trying to explain all this away. The fact of the matter is all they have to say, the White House could say, we would like to think that, American-based corporations would never do the bidding of authoritarian regimes to crush dissent. We can't intervene directly. It is their choice, but we would like it if American countries would stand for freedom wherever they can. Something like that.
That's a good answer.
Thank you. But instead, it's like, they can do whatever they want, but like Twitter's really scary. Wait, hold on. Twitter's really scary? This is, they view, you have to remember, the Democrats view the only real opponents that they have in the world. All the countries that we think of as opposition, I mean, with the exception of Russia because of Trump, but all the countries around the world that we think of as a problem for us, not a problem for Democrats. Domestic opposition is a threat to their power. It is a much bigger concern for them than anything the Chinese Communist Party is doing. In fact, as we know, Democrats kind of envy the CCP, Clay. They've written columns about it. They kind of like what's going on over there.
Well, and here's what's going on, too. I think Apple stepped in it in a big way because a lot of people are willing to kind of look the other way at Apple. I've got an iPhone. You've got an iPhone, Buck. A huge percentage of our audience, I imagine, have iPhones. There really isn't, like if you were sitting around and you were saying, okay, what's a functional equivalent to the iPhone from a company that isn't evil? I don't know that there is one, right? But when they stepped in it, their head of advertising or whatever it was went on Twitter and said, we're not spending money anymore with Twitter because we're concerned about the safeguards on Twitter. And I'm summarizing what he said. Then a lot of people started saying, wait a minute, you've got basic slave labor in China that's being used to make your phones. And even CNN, Buck, even CNN last night had internal videos of people trying to get outside of the factory, the Foxconn factory that makes all the iPhones, showed what kind of awful living conditions these employees have. And Apple suddenly is on the defensive because they're way more responsive to the Chinese government and making sure that they don't offend China than they are to the United States government. And I think a lot of people are taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, why is China able to dictate to Apple choices that they make? And this is the essence of our failure in China. Because the idea that we had, this is the big failure of American diplomacy with China. The idea that we had, Buck, was, by integrating American companies into the Chinese environment, into their economy, we're going to make China more like America. And so we edited all our movies to make Chinese people happy when they aired there. And what happened was China said, we're not just concerned about what your companies do in China. We want Chinese values to expand around the world. And the American companies, because many of them got used to suckling on the teat of that Chinese commerce, they aren't willing to stand up to China. They fear China. They'll throw the back, they'll pimp slap the United States government, but they're afraid of China. And frankly, it's just not acceptable.
Yeah. You don't want to get stuck on the commerce teat, Clay. It's important.
Initially it was, we're just going to make a little bit more money by putting our movies on in China. And then before long, China's like, well, you can't have that scene in it. You can't have that scene in it. And now they lecture us about things that happen outside of China.
Can I just throw one thing in there?
And it's unacceptable.
Remember when they used to have like concerts, Tibetan freedom, and there was all this stuff? I feel like 20 years ago, it was a really fashionable time for celebrities. Richard Gere, they're always talking about Tibet. Whatever happened to all that? I feel like China got really rich and powerful and influential.
You're
in Hollywood.
100% right.
And all of a sudden, it's like, Tibet, it's kind of a small country, not that important to them anymore. It really changed very rapidly, didn't it?
It did in a massive way. And to the point, we talked about this on our show a while back. The best example of that is Red Dawn They literally changed the country that was invading the United States because China got so powerful that they forced us to change it to North Korea. Think about how, from a pure power perspective, merely being, just think about this. How often are there Chinese villains in any American movie?
Oh, I talk about this all the time. Never.
They don't exist anymore.
There was
always some Eastern European dude with an accent. Like there's never an Asian
usually with
bad
like
guy.
a shock of blonde hair who talks kind of like this and wears black turtlenecks. He's like, I'm going to take over the world because I'm so evil. That's always the bad guy now. You're like, really?
You can't have.
I think that guy's like selling me overpriced furniture somewhere. Like Swedish design. Yeah. Anyway,
it's really funny, but you can't have an Asian villain now. China won't allow it. China has taken over so much of American commerce, and Apple's a perfect example of it. Look, Apple, if I were a politician, Buck, I would come out and I would say Apple has to make all of its product in a democratic country. That's all they have to do. There's a lot of them to choose from. You don't have to make them all here. I wish they did. But just pick a democratic country to be spending your billions and billions of dollars in.